Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. This is a story that will shake you to your core. Enjoy the journey. My name is Rebecca, and I need to tell you something that's been eating at my soul for years. I was a cheater, a liar, a woman who stood in church every Sunday, singing hymns with my hands raised high while hiding the darkest secret you could imagine. For 15 years, I was married to David, the kindest man you'd ever meet. He worked 2 jobs to provide for our family, never missed a single one of our children's school events, and still found time to volunteer at our local church every weekend. David trusted me completely, utterly, without question, and I betrayed that trust over and over again. You see, I didn't cheat because David wasn't enough. I didn't cheat because our marriage was broken or because I was unloved. I cheated because I was addicted to the thrill, the rush, the dangerous excitement of doing something I knew was forbidden. It was like a drug coursing through my veins every time I received a secret text message, every stolen glance across a crowded room, every lie I told so smoothly that even I believed it. Our church family saw us as the perfect couple, David and Rebecca Thompson, pillars of the community. I taught Sunday school to teenagers, organized charity drives, and led women's Bible study groups where we discussed faithfulness, integrity, and God's plan for marriage. The irony still makes me sick to my stomach. But here's what I never expected, what I never saw coming in my wildest nightmares. God was watching. God was keeping track. And God had a plan to show me exactly what my choices would cost me. I thought I was clever, thought I had everything under control. I had no idea that my carefully constructed world of lies was about to come crashing down in ways that would change not just my life, but the lives of everyone I claimed to love. The reckoning was coming, and it would be more devastating than anything I could have ever imagined. It all started so innocently, or at least that's what I told myself. 3 years into my marriage with David, I was volunteering at a community outreach program our church sponsored downtown. That's where I met Marcus, a social worker with piercing blue eyes and a smile that could melt steel. Marcus wasn't a church member. He was rough around the edges, the complete opposite of my gentle, predictable husband. Where David was safe and comfortable, Marcus was dangerous and unpredictable. He rode a motorcycle, had tattoos peeking out from under his sleeves, and spoke with a confidence that made my heart race in ways I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. It started with coffee. Just to discuss the program, I told myself. We'd meet at a little cafe across town where nobody from our church would see us. Marcus would lean across the table, his hand sometimes brushing mine as he reached for his cup, and I'd feel electricity shoot through my entire body. "You're not like other church ladies," he'd say with that dangerous grin. "There's fire in you, Rebecca. I can see it." I should have run. I should have told David immediately and removed myself from the situation. Instead, I found myself looking forward to our meetings more than anything else in my week. I'd spend extra time getting ready, choosing outfits that were just a little too tight, a little too revealing for a married woman meeting with a colleague. The first time Marcus kissed me, I was standing in the supply closet at the community center, reaching for boxes of donated clothes. He cornered me there, his hands on either side of my face, and before I could protest, his lips were on mine. The kiss lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it ignited something inside me that I didn't even know existed. I drove home that night with my lips still tingling, guilt and excitement warring in my chest. David was in the kitchen making dinner, humming one of our favorite hymns, completely trusting and oblivious. When he kissed me hello, I almost broke down and confessed everything right then, but I didn't. Instead, I went to our bedroom and knelt beside our bed, praying desperately for God to forgive me and help me resist temptation. I promised him and myself that it would never happen again. The problem was, I was already addicted to the rush, and I didn't even realize it yet. The danger, the secrecy, the way Marcus looked at me like I was the most desirable woman in the world, it was intoxicating. 2 days later, I was back in that supply closet, and this time I didn't resist at all. The pattern became my prison, and I was both the warden and the inmate. Every Monday morning, I'd kneel in our bedroom while David showered, tears streaming down my face as I begged God for forgiveness. I'd promise him, promise myself that this week would be different. This week, I'd end it with Marcus and become the wife David deserved. But by Wednesday, the guilt would start fading, replaced by an itch I couldn't scratch. I'd catch myself checking my phone obsessively, hoping for a text from Marcus. When it inevitably came, "Miss you, beautiful? Coffee today?" my resolve would crumble like sand. Sunday mornings were the worst. I'd sit in the front pew of Riverside Baptist Church, David's arm around me, singing Amazing Grace, while my heart hammered with shame. Pastor Williams would preach about the sanctity of marriage, about faithfulness and honor, and I'd nod along like the hypocrite I was becoming. "Amen, Pastor," I'd whisper, while mentally calculating when I could next see Marcus. The Sunday school classes I taught became elaborate performances. 15 teenage girls would hang on my every word as I lectured them about purity, about waiting for marriage, about the importance of integrity. Your body is a temple, I'd tell them. The same phrase I'd heard 1,000 times growing up. Guard your heart above all else. Meanwhile, I was desecrating my own temple weekly, sometimes twice a week, in hotel rooms across town. David never suspected a thing. Sweet, trusting David would ask about my volunteer work with such genuine pride in his voice. You're making such a difference down there, honey. Those people are lucky to have someone like you caring for them. If only he knew what kind of caring I was really doing. The guilt became a living thing inside me, growing stronger with each betrayal. I'd lie awake at night, David's arm across my waist, listening to his peaceful breathing and hating myself. Sometimes I'd slip out of bed and sit in our kitchen, staring at our wedding photo on the refrigerator. We looked so young, so hopeful, so innocent. But even as the guilt consumed me, the addiction grew stronger. Marcus had awakened something in me that I didn't know how to put back to sleep. The thrill of sneaking around, of having this dangerous secret, became as intoxicating as the physical betrayal itself. I started taking bigger risks, meeting Marcus in restaurants closer to our neighborhood, staying out later with increasingly creative excuses. Once, I even let him call me while David was in the next room, whispering into the phone like a teenager hiding from her parents. The worst part? I was getting better at lying. The words came easier, the stories more elaborate and believable. I could look David in the eye and tell him I was at a church committee meeting while Marcus's cologne still lingered on my clothes. But God sees everything, and he was preparing to show me exactly what my choices would cost. David wasn't stupid. He was trusting, yes, but not blind. After 8 months of my double life, I started noticing the way his eyes lingered on me when I thought he wasn't looking. The questions became more specific, more probing. Which restaurant did you say you went to with the ladies from church? He'd ask casually while folding laundry. My heart would skip a beat. Had I said restaurant? I thought I'd said we met at Sandra's house. The lies were getting harder to keep straight. Oh, we just grabbed coffee at that little place on Main Street. I'd recover quickly, but I could see something shift in his expression, a flicker of doubt that hadn't been there before. David started coming home at unexpected times. He'd walk into the house during his lunch break, claiming he forgot something, but I could feel him studying me, looking for signs of something he couldn't quite name. One evening, while I was in the shower, I heard my phone buzzing repeatedly on the bathroom counter. When I came out, David was sitting on our bed, his face pale. Your phone kept going off, he said quietly. I didn't look at it, but, Rebecca, is everything okay? You seem different lately. Distant. My blood ran cold. Marcus had been texting me all day, increasingly bold messages that would destroy everything if David saw them. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking slightly as I deleted the messages without reading them. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired from all the volunteer work, I said, forcing a smile. You know how demanding it can be. But David's eyes didn't leave my face. Maybe you should take a break from the community center. You've been working so hard there, and we barely spend time together anymore. Panic shot through me like lightning. Stop volunteering? That was my cover, my excuse, my lifeline to Marcus. Oh, David, I can't do that. These people depend on me. The program would fall apart without proper coordination. The words tumbled out too quickly, too desperately. David nodded slowly, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was connecting dots I desperately needed to keep separate. That night, he held me closer than usual, his hand stroking my hair in the darkness. I love you, Rebecca, he whispered. I hope you know that. Whatever's going on, we can work through anything together. His words were like knives in my chest. This good, faithful man was offering me grace I didn't deserve, a lifeline I was too addicted to take. The next morning, I found him sitting at our kitchen table with his coffee and Bible reading Hosea, the story of the unfaithful wife and the husband who loved her anyway. When he looked up at me, his eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying. Interesting passage, he said softly, about love that pursues even when it's betrayed. I couldn't speak. I just poured my coffee with trembling hands and left for my volunteer work, knowing I was walking deeper into a pit I might never climb out of. Marcus was waiting for me with that dangerous smile, completely unaware that my carefully constructed world was beginning to crack. Marcus was getting bolder, and that terrified me. What had started as stolen moments in supply closets had evolved into something far more dangerous. He began showing up at places he had no business being, the grocery store where I shopped, the gas station near our house, even lurking in the church parking lot after Sunday service. I missed you, he'd say, cornering me between cars while David was inside talking with Pastor Williams. 3 days is too long, Rebecca. I need to see you more. Marcus, you can't be here, I'd whisper frantically, looking over my shoulder. Someone will see us. But he'd just laugh, that reckless laugh that used to thrill me and now made my stomach churn with anxiety. Let them see. Maybe it's time to stop playing games. The first real consequence came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was leaving a hotel across town where Marcus and I had spent the afternoon when I literally ran into Janet Morrison, the pastor's wife, in the lobby. She was there for a women's ministry planning meeting in one of the conference rooms. "Rebecca, what a surprise." Janet's warm smile faltered slightly as she took in my appearance. My disheveled hair, my wrinkled clothes, the guilty flush spreading across my face. "Janet, hi, there was a community outreach meeting here," I stammered, the lie falling apart even as it left my lips. Why would a community meeting be in a hotel? Janet's eyes moved past me to the elevator doors, which were opening to reveal Marcus straightening his shirt. The silence stretched between us like a loaded gun. "I see," Janet said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that made my knees weak. "Well, I should get to my meeting, give my love to David." That night, I couldn't eat dinner. I kept waiting for David's phone to ring, for Pastor Williams to call and demand an explanation, but the call never came. Instead, something worse happened. Janet didn't say anything to anyone. Not yet. But I could feel her watching me at church, studying me during women's Bible study, her kind eyes now filled with sadness and disappointment. She knew, and knowing that she knew was eating me alive. Marcus, meanwhile, seemed energized by the close call. "Did you see her face?" He laughed when I told him what happened. "Maybe this is a sign, Rebecca. Maybe it's time to stop hiding." "Are you insane?" I hissed. "That woman could destroy my entire life with one conversation. Or maybe she just set you free," Marcus replied, pulling me closer. "You can't live this double life forever, beautiful. Something's got to give." He was right, but not in the way he thought. Something was about to give, and it would be more catastrophic than either of us could imagine. 2 days later, Janet approached me after church with a gentle hand on my arm. "Rebecca, dear, could we talk privately sometime? Maybe over coffee this week?" My heart stopped. The reckoning was beginning, and I was completely unprepared for what was coming. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything except Janet's request for coffee. 3 days passed before I finally called her, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. "Of course, dear." Janet's voice was gentle but firm. "How about Thursday morning at Cornerstone Cafe? Around 10? Cornerstone Cafe. The same place where Marcus and I had shared our first coffee 6 months ago. The irony felt like God's cruel joke. I spent the entire week planning what I would say. Maybe I could convince Janet she was mistaken. Maybe I could craft a story that would explain everything away. But deep down, I knew I was trapped. Thursday morning came like an execution date. Janet was already seated when I arrived, her silver hair perfectly styled, her kind eyes serious. She'd ordered me a vanilla latte, my favorite, which somehow made everything worse. "Rebecca, honey," she began, stirring her tea slowly. "I've been praying about our conversation all week, and I need to ask you something directly, because I love you and David too much to pretend I don't see what's happening." My mouth went dry. "Janet, are you having an affair?" The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. I could lie. I should lie. But looking into Janet's compassionate eyes, the same eyes that had watched me grow up in that church, that had celebrated my wedding, that had prayed over me countless times, I couldn't form the words. Instead, tears began streaming down my face. "Oh, Rebecca," Janet whispered, reaching across the table to take my hand. "Oh, honey, what have you done?" For 20 minutes, I told her everything. About Marcus, about the addiction to danger, about the lies that had consumed my life. Janet listened without judgment, occasionally handing me tissues, her own eyes wet with tears. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "Rebecca, you have to end this immediately, today, and you have to tell David." "I can't," I sobbed. "It will destroy him. It will destroy our family. Continuing this will destroy him worse," Janet said firmly. "And secrets have a way of coming out on their own, usually in the most painful way possible." She was right, but I wasn't ready to lose everything. Not yet. "Please, Janet," I begged. "Give me time to figure this out. I'll end it with Marcus, I promise, but I need time to find the right way to tell David." Janet studied my face for a long moment. 2 weeks, Rebecca. I'll give you 2 weeks to come clean. If you don't, I'll have to tell Pastor Williams, and he'll want to involve David in a conversation about your marriage. 2 weeks. 14 days to figure out how to destroy my own life. That afternoon, I met Marcus one last time, intending to end everything. But when he kissed me in the parking lot of the community center, all my resolve crumbled. I was weak. I was addicted. And my time was running out. 10 days. I had 10 days left before Janet's deadline. And instead of ending things with Marcus, I'd fallen deeper into the web of deception. The pressure was driving me to make increasingly reckless decisions. Marcus sensed my desperation and used it to his advantage. "Run away with me," he whispered during what I'd promised myself would be our final meeting. "We can start over somewhere new. California, maybe, or Florida." "I can't abandon my children," I protested, even as part of me was tempted by the fantasy of escape. "Bring them," he said. "David's a good guy, but he's boring, Rebecca. You were meant for more than this small-town church life." The suggestion was insane, but it planted a seed in my mind. What if I could have both? What if there was a way to keep my family and my freedom? That's when I made the decision that would seal my fate. Instead of confessing to David or ending things with Marcus, I decided to run, not permanently, just long enough to think, to figure out my next move. I told David I needed to visit my sister in Atlanta for a few days, that she was going through a difficult divorce and needed support. David, ever the loving husband, helped me pack. "Give Sarah my love," he said, kissing me goodbye at the airport. "Take all the time you need." But I wasn't going to Atlanta. Marcus had booked us a cabin in the Smoky Mountains 3 hours away. For 4 days, we'd play house pretending we were a real couple without the complications of my other life. The cabin was beautiful, isolated, perfect for our illusion. Marcus cooked for me, we took long walks in the woods, and for brief moments, I let myself believe this could be my reality. No church obligations, no judgment, no guilt. Just passion and freedom. But reality has a way of crashing even the most elaborate fantasies. On our 3rd day, while Marcus was showering, his phone rang. I answered without thinking, expecting it to be work. "Marcus? Thank God you answered. It's Diane." "Diane?" I'd never heard that name before. "I'm sorry, Marcus isn't available right now," I said carefully. There was a pause. "Who is this? Are you the married woman he's been seeing?" My blood turned to ice. "Excuse me." "Listen, honey, I don't know what he's told you, but Marcus and I have been together for 2 years. We're engaged. The wedding's next month." The phone slipped from my hands, clattering to the cabin floor. Engaged. Marcus was engaged to someone else, and I was just another conquest. Another married woman he could manipulate and discard. When Marcus came out of the bathroom, he found me sitting on the bed, staring at nothing. "Everything okay, beautiful?" "Diane called," I said quietly. The color drained from his face. "Rebecca, I can explain, but I was already packing." The fantasy was over, and reality was waiting to exact its price. I had 3 days to get home and face Janet's deadline. 3 days to decide whether to confess everything or let my world explode on its own terms. I chose the coward's path. I chose silence. And God was about to show me exactly what that choice would cost. I returned from the mountains a broken woman, but I hid it well. David picked me up from the airport with flowers and his usual warm smile, asking about my sister Sarah's divorce proceedings. I manufactured stories about court dates and custody battles, each lie sliding off my tongue with practiced ease, but something had fundamentally shifted inside me. Discovering Marcus's engagement hadn't just hurt, it had revealed the depth of my self-deception. I wasn't special to him. I was just another married woman in his collection, another conquest to amuse him while he planned his real future with someone else. Janet's deadline had passed 3 days ago. I waited for the phone to ring, for Pastor Williams to request a meeting, but nothing happened. The silence was more terrifying than any confrontation would have been. Then Marcus started calling, constantly. "Rebecca, we need to talk." His voicemails became increasingly desperate. "Diane doesn't mean anything. You're the one I want." I didn't answer. I couldn't face him, couldn't face the truth that I'd thrown away my marriage for a man who saw me as entertainment. But Marcus wasn't the type to accept rejection gracefully. He began showing up everywhere. At the grocery store, at my children's school, even at our church parking lot. David noticed a motorcycle that seemed to follow us, but I dismissed his concerns with shaking hands. Probably just someone from the neighborhood, I'd say, while my heart hammered against my ribs. The final straw came on a Wednesday evening. David was working late, and I was helping our daughter Emma with her homework when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Marcus standing on our front porch, his face flushed with anger. "Rebecca, I know you're in there," he shouted when I didn't answer. "We need to talk about us." Emma looked up from her math problems, confusion written across her 8-year-old face. "Mommy, who is that man? Why is he yelling?" "Just someone confused about addresses, sweetheart," I whispered, my hands shaking as I quietly deadbolt. "Keep working." But Marcus wouldn't leave. He pounded on the door, shouted my name, even walked around to our backyard and pressed his face against the kitchen window. Emma started crying, and I had to call our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, to come sit with the children while I dealt with what I told her was a troubled person from my volunteer work. When Mrs. Patterson arrived, I slipped out the back door to confront Marcus. "You need to leave," I hissed. "My children are inside. This is my home. Then meet me tomorrow, he demanded. One last time, I need to explain about Diane. There's nothing to explain. We're done, Marcus. Completely done. His face twisted with rage. You don't get to use me and then throw me away, Rebecca. I know where you live, where you work, where your husband works. If you don't meet me tomorrow, I'll tell David everything myself. Terror shot through me like electricity. This wasn't the charming, dangerous man I'd been infatuated with. This was someone capable of destroying everything I had left. I agreed to meet him one final time just to end this nightmare. I had no idea I was walking directly into God's trap. I chose to meet Marcus at a diner outside of town, somewhere public where he couldn't make a scene. My plan was simple: end this definitively, and pray he'd disappear from our lives. I had no idea that God had already set events in motion that would expose everything. Marcus was waiting in a corner booth, his usual cocky smile replaced with something darker. As I sat down across from him, I noticed he'd been drinking. His eyes were bloodshot, and his words slightly slurred. "You look beautiful as always," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled away. "Marcus, this has to stop. You're engaged to someone else and I'm married. What we had was wrong and it's over. But it doesn't have to be," he insisted, his voice rising. "Diane was a mistake. You're the one I really want. Leave, David. We can start over." "I'm not leaving my family," I said firmly, standing to go. "Don't contact me again." That's when Marcus grabbed my wrist, his grip tight enough to bruise. "You think you can just walk away? After everything? I could destroy you with one phone call, Rebecca." I should have left then, should have called the police. Instead, I sat back down, terrified of what he might do to my family. We argued for another 20 minutes, his threats becoming more explicit, more dangerous. What I didn't know was that David had left work early that day. Our son Tommy had forgotten his science project at home, and David wanted to bring it to school before the presentation. When he pulled into our driveway, Mrs. Patterson was still there with the children. "Where's Rebecca?" David asked, confusion clear in his voice. Emma piped up before Mrs. Patterson could answer. "Mommy went to talk to the angry man who was yelling at our door yesterday." David's face went pale. "What angry man?" Mrs. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. "Rebecca said it was someone confused from her volunteer work, a troubled person who needed help. But David wasn't stupid. He'd been sensing something was wrong for months. He asked Mrs. Patterson to stay with the children and drove straight to the community center where I supposedly volunteered." The director, confused by his questions, told him I hadn't been there in over 2 months. Meanwhile, at the diner, Marcus was growing more agitated. "I'm done playing games, Rebecca. Either you choose me, or I choose for you. I'll be at David's office tomorrow morning to tell him everything." I begged, pleaded, even cried. But Marcus was beyond reason. He stormed out of the diner, leaving me sitting there in complete panic. When I got home an hour later, David was waiting in our living room. Mrs. Patterson had left, and the children were in bed. His face was a mask I'd never seen before. Calm, controlled, but with eyes that burned with pain and suspicion. "How was your volunteer meeting?" he asked quietly. "Fine," I answered automatically, not noticing the trap. "That's interesting," David said, standing slowly. "Because I went by the community center today. They told me you haven't volunteered there in months." The words hit me like a physical blow. My carefully constructed world of lies began crumbling in real time. "David, I can explain. Can you?" His voice was still quiet, but there was something broken in it that terrified me more than Marcus's threats. "Because I'm really hoping you can, Rebecca. I'm hoping there's some explanation that doesn't involve my wife lying to me for months." I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. 20 feet away, God was preparing to reveal just how devastating the truth could be. I could have confessed right then. I could have told David everything, thrown myself on his mercy, and begged for forgiveness. Instead, I chose one final lie, the biggest and most destructive one of all. "I was meeting with someone from another organization," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "We've been discussing a partnership program. I didn't tell you because it was supposed to be a surprise." David stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. It was a photo of me and Marcus at the diner, clearly in an intimate conversation, Marcus holding my hand across the table. "Mrs. Patterson's daughter works at that diner," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She recognized you and took this picture because she thought it was strange that Mrs. Thompson from church was holding hands with a strange man." The photograph was damning. Even I could see how it looked, like a woman saying goodbye to her lover. "David, this isn't what it looks like." "Stop." His voice cut through my protest like a blade. "Please, stop lying to me. That's when our 16-year-old son Jake appeared at the top of the stairs. He'd been listening. "Dad, what's going on? Why are you and Mom fighting?" David's face crumpled for just a moment before he composed himself. "Go back to bed, son. Your mother and I need to talk." But Jake didn't move. He was old enough to understand the tension, old enough to read the devastation on his father's face. "Mom, who is that man in the picture?" The question hung in the air like poison. I looked at my son, my beautiful, innocent boy who'd always seen me as his hero, and I watched something die in his eyes as the truth became clear. "Jake, please go to your room," I whispered. He didn't argue. He just turned and walked away, but not before I saw the disappointment and disgust flash across his face. My own son was looking at me like I was a stranger. David waited until Jake's door closed before speaking again. "How long?" he asked. "David, how long, Rebecca?" 8 months, I whispered. The words seemed to physically stagger him. He sat down heavily in his chair, his head in his hands. 8 months. While I was working double shifts to save for Emma's college fund. While I was bragging to everyone about my wonderful wife who volunteers so much at the community center. While I was planning our anniversary surprise. Anniversary surprise. Our 17th anniversary was next month. I'd forgotten completely. "I love you, David," I said desperately. "I know this looks terrible, but I love you and the children more than anything." "No." He looked up at me with eyes I didn't recognize. "People who love their families don't do this, Rebecca. People who love their families don't destroy everything for a stranger." That night, David slept in the guest room. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing that everything I'd built over 17 years was crashing down around me. But the real devastation was just beginning, because Marcus wasn't finished with me yet. The next morning, David was gone when I woke up. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Took the kids to my mother's for the weekend. We all need space to think. Space to think." As if thinking would somehow undo 8 months of betrayal. I called David's phone 17 times that day. It went straight to voicemail. I drove to his mother's house, but the curtains were drawn and no one answered the door. I could see Jake's shadow in an upstairs window, but when I waved, he stepped back from the glass. By Sunday, the news had spread through our church like wildfire. Janet must have finally spoken to Pastor Williams. When I tried to attend service, hoping to maintain some semblance of normalcy, the whispers followed me down the aisle like a plague. "That's her," I heard Mrs. Hendricks whisper to her husband, the one who was carrying on with that man. "Poor David," someone else murmured. "Such a good man. How could she do this to him?" Pastor Williams approached me before the service began. His usual warm smile was replaced with professional concern. "Rebecca, perhaps it would be best if you took some time away from your teaching duties," he said quietly, "until you and David work through your situation. My situation. 8 months of adultery reduced to a polite euphemism." I left church and drove home to an empty house. The silence so complete it felt oppressive. That's when Marcus called. "I heard about the photo," he said without preamble. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I never wanted it to happen this way." "Stay away from my family," I said, my voice hollow. "I can't. I'm in love with you. Leave David and marry me. We can make this right." "You're engaged to someone else." "Not anymore. I broke up with Diane yesterday. For you, Rebecca. For us." The absurdity of it hit me like a slap. This man had destroyed my marriage, my family, my reputation, and he thought I'd run away with him now? "There is no us, Marcus. There never was. You were just using me." "That's not true," he protested. "Meet me tonight. Let me prove how much I love you." I hung up without answering, but Marcus wasn't the type to accept rejection gracefully. That evening, he appeared at my door again. This time, I called the police. When the officers arrived, Marcus was sitting on my front steps, claiming he was worried about my emotional state. "She's been under a lot of stress," he told the officers with false concern. "Her marriage is falling apart, and I'm afraid she might hurt herself." The police couldn't arrest him for sitting on a public sidewalk, so they simply asked him to leave. But as he walked to his motorcycle, he turned back to me. "This isn't over, Rebecca. You can't throw away what we have." That night, someone vandalized our mailbox with red paint. The word whore was scrawled across it in dripping letters. I cleaned it off at 3 a.m, praying none of the neighbors would see. The next day, David came home alone. The children stayed with his mother. "I've filed for divorce," he said without emotion, "and I've requested full custody of Jake and Emma. Full custody." The words hit me like physical blows. "David, please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. I can't trust you, Rebecca, and I won't expose our children to any more of this chaos." That's when I realized the true cost of my choices. I hadn't just lost my husband. I was losing my children too. That was 3 years ago. 3 long, empty years that feel like a lifetime of punishment for 8 months of selfish pleasure. David got his divorce and his full custody. I see Jake and Emma every other weekend, court-mandated visits that feel more like supervised meetings with strangers than time with my children. Jake barely speaks to me anymore. At 19 now, he's old enough to choose, and he chooses to stay away. Emma, my sweet 11-year-old, still hugs me goodbye, but there's a distance in her eyes that wasn't there before. "Why did you hurt Daddy?" she asked me last month, the question delivered with the brutal honesty only children possess. I had no answer that wouldn't damage her further, so I just held her and apologized for the 1,000th time, knowing it would never be enough. I live alone now in a small apartment across town, the house where we raised our children, where David and I planned our future, where I destroyed everything. David kept it. I drive past it sometimes, torturing myself with memories of Sunday morning pancakes and family movie nights. The church expelled me quietly. No dramatic confrontation, just a gentle suggestion that I find a new place to worship. Pastor Williams was kind but firm. "The congregation needs time to heal, Rebecca. Your presence makes that difficult." I tried other churches, but small towns have long memories and loud whispers. Eventually, I stopped trying. My job at the insurance office is mundane, solitary work that pays enough to cover my rent and the child support I'm grateful to provide. My coworkers are polite but distant. They know who I am, what I did. In a town this size, everyone knows. Marcus disappeared after the divorce was finalized. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he moved to another state, probably found another married woman to manipulate. The thought makes me sick, knowing I enabled his pattern, knowing there might be another Rebecca somewhere making the same catastrophic choices. Some evenings, I sit in my empty apartment and try to calculate the true cost of those 8 months. A 17-year marriage, the respect of my children, my home, my community, my faith, the trust of everyone who ever loved me. The worst part isn't the loneliness, though that's crushing. It's not the financial struggle or the social isolation, though both are real. The worst part is knowing that I did this to myself. I had everything: a devoted husband, beautiful children, a community that respected me, a faith that sustained me, and I threw it all away for the temporary thrill of forbidden excitement. Every morning I wake up and remember what I've lost. Every night I go to bed knowing I'll never get it back. The consequences of my choices aren't just punishment, they're permanent. This is my life now. This is what I chose when I chose Marcus over my family, lies over truth, momentary pleasure over lasting love. And the most terrifying part? I know God isn't finished with me yet. 3 years of isolation teaches you things about yourself that you never wanted to learn. I've discovered that guilt isn't just an emotion. It's a physical presence that sits in your chest, heavy and permanent, making every breath feel labored. The worst moments come unexpectedly. Last week I was grocery shopping when I heard a familiar laugh from the next aisle. For a split second, my heart leaped, thinking it might be Emma. But it was just another little girl, giggling with her mother over cereal choices. The simple joy of their interaction, something I used to take for granted, left me standing frozen in the frozen food section, crying over frozen peas. I've tried therapy, recommended by my lawyer during the divorce proceedings. Dr. Martinez is kind and professional, but even she can't undo the fundamental truth. Some mistakes create permanent damage. Forgiveness is possible, Rebecca, she tells me during our sessions. Both forgiving yourself and earning forgiveness from others. But she's wrong about the second part. Jake made that clear 6 months ago when he turned 18. I'd hoped his becoming an adult might soften his heart, might make him willing to rebuild our relationship. Instead, he came to my apartment with legal papers. "I'm changing my last name," he announced, standing in my doorway like a stranger. "I don't want to be connected to you anymore." The papers were for a legal name change, from Jake Thompson to Jake Morrison, his grandfather's name. David's father, who died when Jake was young but who represented everything honorable in our family line. "Jake, please," I begged. "I know I made terrible mistakes, but I'm still your mother." "No," he said, his voice steady and cold. "Mothers don't destroy their families for strangers. You stopped being my mother the day you chose that man over us." Emma still visits, but even she's changing. She's at that age where friends matter more than family anyway, and I can see her pulling away incrementally. Last weekend, she spent most of our visit texting her friends, barely looking up from her phone. "Are you dating anyone, Mom?" she asked suddenly, the question catching me off guard. "No, sweetheart. I'm not interested in dating." "Good," she said, her young voice carrying an adult's wisdom. "You're not very good at it." The observation stung because it was true. I wasn't good at relationships. I'd proven that spectacularly. My sister Sarah calls occasionally from Atlanta, checking on me with the dutiful concern of family obligation rather than genuine affection. She was David's friend first, having introduced us in college. and my betrayal damaged that relationship too. "I don't understand you, Rebecca," she said during our last conversation. "David was the best thing that ever happened to you, and you just threw it all away. For what?" "For what, indeed? For excitement. For the thrill of being desired by someone dangerous. For 8 months of stolen moments that cost me a lifetime of genuine love. The cruelest irony is that I understand now what I had with David. 3 years of solitude have taught me the value of steady, faithful love. I remember how he used to bring me coffee in bed every morning, how he'd listen to my mundane stories about work with genuine interest, how he'd hold me during movies even after 15 years of marriage. I took it all for granted, dismissed it as boring, ordinary. Now I know that ordinary love is the rarest treasure of all. But knowledge without opportunity for redemption is just another form of torture. Yesterday was Emma's 12th birthday. I wasn't invited to her party. That privilege belongs to David's new girlfriend, Catherine, who's been helping him raise my children for the past year. Instead, I was allowed a brief visit at McDonald's, just Emma and me, sharing chicken nuggets and pretending everything was normal. Emma showed me pictures from her party on her phone. Catherine had organized a pool party with all of Emma's friends. There was a beautiful cake, decorations, and laughter. All the things I used to provide. In every photo, Emma looked genuinely happy, happier than I'd seen her in years. "Catherine's really nice, Mom," Emma said, swiping through the images. "She helped me with my science project last week. We won second place at the science fair." I forced a smile and congratulated her, even as my heart shattered into smaller pieces. Catherine was there for the science fair. Catherine organized the birthday party. Catherine was living the life I'd thrown away. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." But I wasn't there to be proud in person. I wasn't there to see her face light up when they announced the winners. I wasn't there because 3 years ago, I chose Marcus over moments like these. When I dropped Emma back at the house where I used to live, I saw David and Catherine in the kitchen window. He was washing dishes while she dried them, working together in the easy rhythm of domestic partnership. He was laughing at something she said, his face relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen during our last years together. David has moved on. He's found someone who values what he offers, someone who won't betray his trust for a cheap thrill. Watching them together, I realized something that nearly brought me to my knees. David is better off without me. The children are better off too. Jake graduated high school last month and got accepted to college on a partial scholarship. Emma's grades have improved, and she's joined the school drama club. They're thriving in ways they never did during those final months when I was living my double life, when my distraction and guilt poisoned our home atmosphere. I thought my betrayal only hurt me and David. I was wrong. My choices created a toxic environment that affected everyone in our family. The children are healthier now, in their stable home with their father and his girlfriend who puts their needs first. This realization is perhaps the hardest truth I've had to face. My family is better without me. I've tried to find purpose in other ways. I volunteer at a homeless shelter now, serving meals to people who understand what it means to lose everything. But even there, I'm careful about getting too involved, too close to anyone. I've learned that I can't be trusted with other people's trust. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd made different choices. If I'd resisted Marcus from the beginning, or confessed after that first kiss, or ended things before they spiraled out of control. But wondering is just another form of self-torture, and I've become an expert at that. The hardest part of living with permanent consequences isn't the loneliness or the shame. It's the knowledge that there are some mistakes you can never undo, some trust you can never rebuild, some relationships you can never restore. I destroyed the most precious things in my life for temporary pleasure, and now I live every day with the weight of that choice. This isn't a story with redemption at the end. This is a cautionary tale about the true cost of selfish decisions, and I'm still paying that cost, one empty day at a time. Last month, I received news that changed everything I thought I understood about consequences and divine justice. It came in the form of a phone call from Dr. Stevens, my gynecologist, asking me to come in for an urgent consultation about my recent test results. I'd been having some unusual symptoms for months: fatigue, irregular bleeding, pain that I'd dismissed as stress. When you're living with the weight of destroying your own life, physical discomfort seems trivial. "Rebecca," Dr. Stevens said, her voice gentle but direct, "the biopsy results show that you have cervical cancer. Advanced stage. We need to discuss treatment options immediately." Cancer. The word hung in the air like a final judgment. "How advanced?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Stage 4. It's spread to surrounding organs." "Rebecca, I wish I had better news, but we're looking at palliative care rather than curative treatment. With aggressive therapy, we might extend your life by 12 to 18 months. 12 to 18 months. After 3 years of living with the consequences of my choices, God was apparently ready to close the book entirely. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same reckless behavior that destroyed my marriage had also put my health at risk. Multiple partners, unprotected encounters, and moments of passion. I'd gambled with everything, including my life, and now all the bills were coming due at once. I called David that night. He answered on the third ring, his voice cautious. "Rebecca, is everything okay?" "I have cancer," I said simply. "I'm dying." The silence stretched between us for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, tinged with the concern that had always been part of his nature. "How long?" he asked. "Maybe a year, maybe less. The kids, they should know." We agreed to tell Jake and Emma together. The conversation was awkward, painful, but necessary. Jake's anger seemed to soften slightly in the face of mortality, though he didn't offer forgiveness. Emma cried and asked if there was anything doctors could do. "We'll try treatment," I told her, "but sometimes God has different plans." Over the following weeks, as I began chemotherapy that made me violently sick but offered little hope, I had time to reflect on the strange justice of my situation. I'd thought the worst consequence of my affair was losing my family. I was wrong. The worst consequence is dying alone with the knowledge that my children will remember me not as the mother who loved them, but as the woman who destroyed their family. My legacy isn't the Sunday school classes I taught or the charity work I did. It's betrayal, broken trust, and pain that will outlive me. Sometimes lying in my hospital bed during treatment, I wonder if Marcus ever thinks about me. If he knows that his pursuit of married women carries real costs, real casualties. Probably not. Men like Marcus move on to new conquests without looking back at the wreckage they leave behind. I'm not asking for your sympathy. I'm telling you this story as a warning, a cautionary tale about choices and consequences. Every decision we make sends ripples through time, affecting not just ourselves, but everyone who loves us. I chose 8 months of excitement over 17 years of faithful love. I chose temporary pleasure over permanent relationships. I chose selfishness over sacrifice. And now I'm dying with those choices, alone in a world I created through my own betrayal. This is what happens when you gamble with everything that matters. Sometimes, you lose it all. The question isn't whether God forgives us. I believe He does. The question is whether we can live with the consequences of our choices. I couldn't. And now I don't have to much longer. Remember my story. Learn from my mistakes. Some prices are too high to pay. Some consequences are permanent. Some choices destroy everything.